In this presentation, I will be discussing the employment challenges faced by female veterans. So why is this topic relevant? A lot of research has been conducted about the challenges faced by veterans as they reintegrate back into their communities. However, there is a gender-specific need for the services provided for these veterans. In an assessment conducted by the Services Women's Action Network, women were said to make up the fastest growing segment of the veteran population. And with this is a higher unemployment rate for these women compared to their male veteran counterparts. With this information, it is clear that as a counselor, it is important to understand that the needs of female veterans are unique and different than the male veterans in whom they serve next to, and therefore they need to be treated as such. While this presentation is primarily focused on the employment challenges, it is also important to note that female veterans are reported to have a higher risk of developing mental health issues, such as depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. This is important to understand when treating female veterans, as there may be other complications to transition back into the community. Before I begin discussing some of the employment challenges faced by female veterans, I think it is important to further understand why there is a need to specifically address the differences faced by female and male veterans. In the previously mentioned assessment conducted by the Services Women's Action Network, there were found to be a multitude of challenges faced by women within the Army. Some of those challenges included belonging, recognition, harassment, and assault. As there is a reported lack of unity and understanding for the female vets, as well as the physical and sexual mistreatment, there is a clear need for treatment to be designed specifically for the challenges faced by female veterans. In addition, in an article written by Strong, Crow, and Lawson about the female veteran identity, female veterans are reportedly younger, more racially diverse, and more educated than their male counterparts. These psychosocial factors add to the notion that these women need specific treatment different than their male veterans. With this information, I will now move on to discuss how these issues feed into employment challenges faced by female veterans. While there are a multitude of challenges that can affect female veterans seeking employment, the three that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation include social stigma and bias, gender-specific services, and adapting to civilian life. The first issue I want to address is the social stigma and bias faced by female veterans. While there is a general stigma towards veterans, that maybe they will be perceived as weak for seeking treatment, or that they may not be able to sustain a job because of their mental health issues, female veterans face other stigmas as well. According to Strong, Crow, and Lawson in their article on female veteran identity, society assumes that females are not in combat units in the Army, and therefore their injuries and what they have seen are not as intense or as traumatizing as male soldiers. With this comes internalization from the women that their injuries or adjustments do not need treatment or are not deserving of the same services as men. In addition, Strong, Crow, and Lawson report that for career paths, women feel pressured to return to their mother or spouse role that they may have held before their military service, or that they need to seek that domesticated life if they did not have those roles beforehand. As a result, female veterans have a higher dissatisfaction reintegrating into the community, as there is an expectation for these females to return to these gender norm roles, as opposed to seeking careers that may fulfill their new veteran status identity. Congruent with the previous challenge of social stigma and bias arises the gender-specific services. According to Tamika Gear's article discussing the transition from military life to civilian life for female veterans, career policies and programs were originally solely for men, as that was historically the gender who required the services the most. As a result, the system is still struggling to adopt other services and programs to support female veterans in their search for employment. In the previous slide, I also mentioned the domestic path that is assumed that females will take for their career upon returning home. Unfortunately, access to education, services, and healthcare is still predominantly male-focused, which is why it is important to understand that female veterans have unique needs that need to be addressed with their transition back into the community, especially because domestic life and those careers are not always what the females want as they return from their service. Therefore, there needs to be more awareness and services available for female veterans to satisfy their identity and needs and not succumb to historical or societal norms. The final challenge I will be addressing is adapting to civilian life. Both women and men who are returning home from their military service face this issue. Adapting to civilian life for employment purposes includes translating military skills to civilian life, finding job satisfaction in civilian forms of employment, and understanding mental health could be a factor in the types of jobs that these veterans are able to do. These issues are central to address for both female and male veterans, as they are real conditions that need to be discussed, supported, in order for the veteran to successfully find a new career path. With the knowledge of some of the challenges facing female veterans when seeking employment, I believe that a postmodern perspective for counseling is ideal for this population. As there is a hyper-masculine culture in military life, female identity and the needs associated with how that identity supports finding a career often gets neglected. I believe that a postmodern approach can support female veterans through the following qualities. The first is that a postmodern perspective supports the client identifying their own narrative. Therefore, a female veteran would be given a voice, which would empower her identity and allow her to embrace her feelings about transitioning into a new career. The second quality is meaning-making, where a female veteran could explore how her past experience could support her in the present, instead of shutting the past away. This would further validate her experience and look towards the future. The third is self-reflection. Being in a male-dominated military experience and potentially returning home to gender-norm careers requires an in-depth look into who this woman is now and how her military life can support her identity as opposed to hinder her future. Finally, I believe that the postmodern emphasis on collaboration would serve this population well. As mentioned earlier, female veterans report a lack of cohesion and acceptance in the military, which can translate to feeling further isolated when transitioning home. Therefore, working with the counselor individually could allow the veteran to feel less isolated, which would thus allow for more open dialogue. With this postmodern approach, I believe that Holland's theory could support the female veteran population. Holland's theory promotes reflecting on one's personality to create a match between personality and career. This emphasis on self-reflection and identity searching is significant in Holland's theory, which could support female veterans' search for an ideal career regardless of gender norms. The assessment for female veterans should relate to the postmodern approach. The main component for this assessment is that regardless of gender, female veterans need to be asked about their military service. Assumptions that they were not in combat or did not experience the same intensity as men are incorrect, and an assessment should therefore address all aspects of a female's military service. With this assessment, according to Busacca and Rufus, should come self-reflection, autonomy, and narratives to support all aspects of the female veteran's identity, which would further enhance the employment-seeking process. One type of assessment example would be the Possible Selves Mapping tool. This is because it will help with the identity searching and career decision-making, as it provides multiple career possibilities with an emphasis on self-reflection. It also supports that the client is the expert of her own experiences, and with those experiences comes abilities and values that can empower her new career. Ethical considerations with this population include client autonomy, as it is important to understand that the client has to make the decisions as it is her story to tell, and a counselor is there for support. The next ethical consideration is non-maleficence, because with veterans specifically, who may have post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health issues, as the counselor, one needs to be careful with their language and their approach. My next ethical consideration is justice, because female veterans are not treated the same as male veterans, which is therefore important as the counselor to provide fair treatment and advocate for appropriate care for these women. Finally, support and safety of keeping client confidentiality and creating an environment where these female veterans feel like they can share their story and emotions in an honest and safe space. These are just a few of the many ethical considerations that should be taken into account when working with this population. There are two best practices that I want to discuss. The first is the individual placement and supported employment model, which is currently being implemented by the Veteran Affairs facilities to support the individual vocational needs of veterans. This is a particularly good model for female veterans in order to treat their unique needs when seeking employment, as they differ from male veterans. As a result, this specific model focuses on an individual versus a whole. The second best practice, according to Busacca and Rufus, is the postmodern solution-focused approach. This is ideal for veterans as it focuses on goals and solutions rather than problems. In addition, it supports the veteran's identity of having multiple selves, which allows the military identity to still be relevant to one's current life. This can help the veteran focus on the present by reconstructing their perception of reality. These two best practices can truly support female veterans. So how can dance movement therapy support female veterans? In her doctoral dissertation, Melissa Nedza used dance movement therapy to support female veterans transitioning back to civilian life. She explained how movement helped these women non-verbally process emotions about their experiences and their transition and to find their voice. Her goals during these sessions included positive body image, self-awareness, identity, emotional expression, as well as exploring the fears of returning home. Through interventions such as mirroring and attaching meaning to symbolic movement, Nedza was able to support these female veterans as they became reacquainted with their bodies post-military service. DMT can also offer a cathartic opportunity to explore the female veteran's trauma and emotions rather than suppress the experiences. Finally, DMT promotes the idea of cohesion and social support through group therapy, which can help female veterans regain a sense of belonging to aid in this transition back to civilian life. To sum up, female veterans require different care than male veterans, but need to be treated for their time spent in the military. In her article, Greer discussed how support for these women should come in the form of affect, affirmation, aid, and honest feedback to help these female veterans with their self-awareness, distinction from their male counterparts, and accessing those transferable skills when applying for jobs. Therefore, the dual stigma as both a veteran and a female veteran need to be addressed in order to support these women in their search for employment and their transition back to civilian life.